Hey, welcome. Today we're diving into a really fascinating, kind of complex theory that says there's a hidden logic, an ancient battle of ideas that's playing out right under our noses in the modern world.
It's a question a lot of us have, right? You look at the news, you look at all the political arguments, and it just feels so chaotic, so random. But what if it isn't? What if all the conflicts we're seeing are actually just new versions of a very, very old war between two completely different ways of thinking?
And that ancient war is between these two big ideas, logos and sophistry. So on one side, you've got logos, which is all about using reason to find the truth. And on the other, you have sophistry, which is really the art of using persuasion to win the argument. The source we're digging into today argues that this clash pretty much explains, well, everything. So, to really understand how this battle is shaping our world right now, we've got to go way back to where it all started, ancient Greece.
So this is logos. You can think of it as the bedrock of all Western philosophy. It's this core idea that through open, honest debate, by really testing our ideas with logic, we can get to these foundational truths, these principles that are just true. It's not about winning for yourself. It's about building a shared reality for the good of the whole civilization. Now, let's flip that and look at sophistry. The source makes a really key point here. Sophistry isn't always about outright lying. A lot of the time, it's about survival. When the barbarians are at the gates and your civilization is under attack, the top priority suddenly shifts. It's not about finding some absolute truth anymore. It's about winning the argument right now, persuading people to follow you so you can survive. Seeking truth kind of becomes a luxury you can't afford.
And this slide just nails the difference in how they work. Logos argues from a principle, an idea that anyone can test and debate with reason. But sophistry, it often argues from a principality, an appeal to some authority or a myth or a belief system that you're just not allowed to question. So you see, one opens up the debate, while the other is specifically designed to shut it down.
Okay, so how is this ancient fight between ideas flaring up today? Well, according to our source, it's happening right out in the open in some very public, very modern places.
I'm sure a lot of you remember this interview. It went absolutely viral. Kathy Newman asks Jordan Peterson, basically, why his right to free speech should be more important than a trans person's right not to be offended. And his response just completely flips the script on her. He points out that she, in her job as a journalist seeking truth, is risking offending him right then and there.
So the analysis from our source is that what happened next was crucial. That really long, awkward pause from Newman, that wasn't just her being caught off guard. That was the exact moment her entire argument, which was based on an assumption she'd never really examined, a principality, ran headfirst into Peterson's appeal to a universal principle, that any real thinking carries the risk of offense. The logic was just airtight and her whole rhetorical frame just collapsed. Gotcha! Now this is where it gets really, really fascinating. The source takes this exact same framework, logos versus sophistry, and applies it to a huge internal conflict that's going on inside the Catholic Church. And the flashpoint for this whole battle is something called the Second Vatican Council, or Vatican II. It was this huge series of meetings back in the 60s that was supposed to modernize the church, but instead, it kind of created these deep, deep divisions that are now hitting a boiling point. The whole fight is about whether Vatican II was a true evolution of the faith or a complete, radical break from tradition.
This brings us to two major traditionalist groups. So, on one hand, you have the integralists. They see the current pope as legitimate, but they think Vatican II was a huge mistake that has to be corrected and reinterpreted through a traditional lens. Their ultimate political goal is what's called a confessional state, where Catholic morality guides the law. Then on the other, more extreme side, you've got the pseudo-vacantists. These guys believe Vatican II was so heretical that it basically created a fake church, and every pope since then has been an illegitimate anti-pope. For them, the throne of St. Peter is literally empty. It's vacant. And for both of these traditionalist groups, the Vatican's current big push for synodality is like the final straw. They look at this process of walking together and listening to everybody as a dangerous attempt to democratize the faith. From their perspective, truth, the logos, isn't something you figure out with a popular vote. It's a sacred truth that the Pope is supposed to protect, not put up for debate. They see it as a sign that the world is cutting itself loose from objective reality. All right, now for the last, and let's be honest, the most mind-bending piece of this theory. This is where the source connects that ancient battle to some of the absolute weirdest and most futuristic headlines we see today.
So the argument here is that all these different things, the big push for UAP disclosure, the rise of AI, the growing crisis in the theory of evolution, and this deep distrust in all our institutions, what if they aren't separate issues at all? What if they're all just symptoms of one massive shift happening in human consciousness?
So let's just look at the pieces of the puzzle we're talking about. You've got the pressure on governments to come clean about what they know about UAPs. You've got these major figures in Silicon Valley talking about AI in really spiritual, sometimes even demonic terms. The scientific basis for Darwinism is facing some serious challenges, and all of this, the source suggests, might actually link up to a really bizarre theory about something called a control system.
So what on earth is this control system? Well, the idea comes from a computer scientist named Jacques Vallée. He suggested that UAPs might not be spaceships from other planets. Instead, he thinks they could be a phenomenon, maybe from another dimension, that acts almost like a thermostat for human belief. It shows up in different ways throughout history, as fairies, ghost airships, gray aliens, always to challenge our worldview and kind of nudge our evolution in a certain direction.
And here's where the source connects the dots to esoteric thinkers like Rudolf Steiner. Over 100 years ago, Steiner actually predicted that a specific kind of intelligence would arrive. He called it Ahrimanic. He described it as a cold, super-logical, non-human consciousness that would try to incarnate through our technology and convince us that the material world is all there is. And for a lot of people, that sounds an awful lot like the end game for artificial intelligence.
So this all sets up what the source sees as the ultimate choice facing humanity. On one side, you have the traditional gospel path, transformation of the soul through a relationship with a creator. And on the other, you have this new techno-Gnostic path, trying to achieve transcendence through secret knowledge, or gnosis, by talking with AI or other non-human intelligences. The end goal? To evolve into some kind of disembodied digital hive mind. So the really crucial point the author makes is that in this new world, where technology is basically offering a counterfeit version of spiritual transcendence, that comfortable, secular middle ground we're all used to is just evaporating. You're going to have to make a choice.
And that leaves us with this final, absolutely massive question. Is it possible that our entire history, from those debates in ancient Greece all the way to the rise of AI, is just one long war between the logos, call it divine reason, and some kind of deceptive, cosmic control system that's trying to trick us into taking a different path entirely? That's the provocative theory we've unpacked today. Thanks for joining me.